I want to welcome you to today's MAP mentoring session. For those of you who have not previously attended one of our events, MAP stands for Mentoring at Purdue, and it's a program that we're starting here in the College of Ag. Dr. Knobloch and I are the co-PIs in this project. It's USDA funded, and then Kristen Bodden is the MAP coordinator. And so what we've tried to do is to establish monthly events, mentoring events, because the goal of this program is to help facilitate the mentoring process among mentors and mentees in the College of Ag, which would also include faculty and staff. So today's session, mentoring, how do we get started? This is part 2 of that. We gave an event last month. And so today, I'll just read a little bit about it. Relationships just happen, right? Some do and many need to be cultivated. Mentoring is no different. In this continuation of a seminar held in March, Dr. Neil Knobloch, Associate Professor and Graduate Chair in Youth Development and Agriculture Education, will facilitate a discussion on practical strategies to enhance mentoring. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And so Kristen will be around to help facilitate this process as well and pass out various documents. So having said that, I'm going to turn the floor over now to Dr. Knobloch, who will begin today's mentoring session.
Thank you, Dr. Esters. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you here. We did do this on March 5th, as you can see, and the document that you're receiving is the same document that we shared in March 5th. As I planned for this workshop today, or seminar today, I thought, what if I had people who were in the first workshop show up? What if I had new people? How do I facilitate this? And so I was going to just have 2 plans ready to go, and seeing that I think we have new faces, then I may give you a little bit more of an introduction as to what we talked about in the front end last time, and so we'll then jump into the discussion and talk about effective mentoring strategies from your experiences, or if you have needs. We want to know what those are, and let's start to keep the conversation. Let's continue the conversation as to what we should be doing to help support one another in this game called mentoring. So to get started, I'm Neil Knobloch, as I was introduced, and if you wouldn't mind just saying who you are, and are you here as a mentor or a mentee? In other words, what role do you have right now? Are you a graduate student, a postdoc, a faculty, a staff? And so just share your name, your department, and then what role are you in right now regarding mentoring. So would you like to start, please?
I'm Stuart Carlson. I'm a postdoc in forestry and natural resources. So I am being mentored.
Very good.
I'm working as a postdoc in ABE. I'm mentoring one of the graduate students.
Okay, so you're doing both.
Yes.
Being mentored or maybe want to be mentored.
Yes.
As well as mentoring then maybe somebody else. What's your name?
My name is Young Booker.
Young.
Call me Young.
Okay, Young. Welcome, Young.
I'm Suresh Sharma. I'm also a postdoc in ABE. Right now, I have not mentored so far, but planning to do so in the future.
Excellent. Welcome.
I have taught some classes.
That's good. Thank you.
I'm Margaret. I'm a graduate student at ABE, and so I'm obviously being mentored. We also have some informal mentoring of graduate students by graduate students that I'm involved in, some mentoring as well.
Fantastic. A peer mentoring approach. Very good.
Yeah, I'm Sibin Raj. I'm also from ABE. We are almost from ABE, are from the same group, research group we all for. I'm also looking to mentor students, and I've been part of ABE mentoring programs and things like that.
Very good. Welcome. Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Kristen Bodden. I'm a graduate student in YDAE, being mentored. I'm the coordinator for the
Right. So Kristen's been doing an excellent job helping coordinate some of this, and Dr. Esters he introduced himself as faculty in our department, PI on the PD on this project, and so you have experiences in mentoring as well, and also had an excellent mentor at Penn State. He now is in a provost position at Penn State, so he's been very successful, and so we're glad that you're all here. I'm going to introduce you to this worksheet with a few slides. And so the first thing I'd like to do is comment on I know these fans are really noisy. I apologize. I'll try to speak up loud enough. I really appreciated the comment that some of you are here as postdocs and you're really thinking about your next move in your career, and mentoring may be a part of that responsibility, grad students as well. And so I thought about that years ago when I was in your shoes, if you will, about 12 years ago. And one of the job items in the job description, these positions you apply for, will say mentoring other scientists or graduate students or undergraduate students. And nobody was teaching a workshop when I was at Ohio State that I was aware of. And I asked one of my committee members, I said, so how do you learn how to mentor? And he said, Neil, you just do the right thing. And I've been serving on this task force for the college, the three of us working with Dr. Sean Duncan, and then there are those from different departments, faculty from different departments on this committee, a grad student, and we've been thinking about what can we do to help formalize mentoring a little bit in the college. And I say that cautiously because when you use the words formalize, it makes it sound rule-bound. And that's not what we're trying to get at. We're trying to get at this. Informal mentoring may work. And some of you may have advisors or coaches in your life where it's just naturally evolved and you just appreciate what they've done for you. How do they do that? Where do they learn it? Maybe probably trial and error. A lot of times we hear they learn because they had a good mentor. But it's just an informal process of how this gets taught, if you will, by observation or being the recipient of it. We would like to formalize it a little bit and get people to talk about it so that we at least can discuss it in a way that's a little bit more formal, if you will. That's what we mean. Let's plan some events in this venue, as well as let's plan some events in your postdoc coaching experience so that you know you're going to have at least minimum one visit a year with your advisor or your coach about how are you doing? What are your career goals? Are you being supported? What are we doing that's helping you get to the goal, the career goal that you want to do? And that's really what we mean by formalizing mentoring. Let's organize it a little bit. Let's give it some structure. Let's make sure that feedback is occurring in a more formal way, or in a way that it feels like you got something specifically about you and not just weekly lab meetings. We understand weekly lab meetings happen. We are 100% on board with those should happen. We understand that you meet with your advisor perhaps on a regular basis. That's good, but sometimes you don't get to talk about you and your future. And that's this notion of mentoring, I think, brings it to the forefront. So why do we talk about mentoring? Well, there's a lot of good reasons, and I'm just going to show a few of those here. It's this idea of professional and personal support, and that needs to be mutual. What we mean by that is you as a protege should be asking really good questions to your mentor, because the way that I learn as a faculty member, as a mentor, is when grad students, for example, are asking me good questions, and I go, wow, I hadn't thought about that before. So do you see, I'm growing in this relationship with my professional knowledge about my field or how I'm developing grad students, but you're also getting some really important feedback or some ideas by collaborating and discussing this with your mentor. This notion of personal support. There's more to life than really research in your job. And so that's where we want it to. It's good for me to know, as a faculty member, it's good for me to know that graduate students have other interests outside of the university. Some of my students, they love animals, and they tell me about their experiences with animals. Sometimes they're sad. They lost their dog because it got ran over, and they had to do a proper burial. Sometimes they go and they get I have one student, they got some new chicks, and so she's raising chickens in her backyard. That is neat, because now I know ways that I can connect with her. I also occasionally try to share things openly about what's going on in my life so that they know, oh, I'm a person too. And so that's that personal support. If you have a relationship, you can discuss those things. This notion of receiving insight into issues that students face. Sometimes you feel this could be embarrassing if I share this. So how do I get the faculty to know what am I working on? What am I working with? Hopefully departments have a way that you can kind of share your feedback. Sometimes there's a rep. Sometimes you just feel really comfortable with your advisor and you can share them. Sometimes I have students that have informally developed the role that I'm going to share. I'm going to share some concerns on behalf of the students when I meet with my advisor. And so, this isn't just my concern. I've heard this from 2 or 3 others. And I happen to be grad chair, and so I welcome that. And that's good to know, and it helps me then bring things to the table at the grad committee meeting to say, I think we have some students that want to know about or more about. And so that's good to think about. The overall goal here is to help everybody feel successful. So how do we do that in a way that's not threatening, right? And that's the way to navigate that. Gaining the opportunity to share their knowledge and skills and developing others, of course, that comes especially from the mentor's point of view. But as I said, you can help feed that with good questions. The last one is this notion of enhancing interpersonal and coaching skills. The research says that those who are successful mentors basically are good at interpersonal skills. So there is something about that. Now, does that mean that you're born with this skill, or can it be developed? I think that all people can learn how to improve the skills that they naturally have. And so that's part of the goal we have with these workshops. The next slide is just a continuation here from more of the proteges level. But you can see I bounce back and forth here. I bounce back with the mentor and the protege, that it really is a twofold process that should mirror each other. So this is someone to talk to about your concerns or your objectives. Building critical interpersonal skills and encouraging career development. You're doing the same thing that the mentor is doing. You may have a slightly different purpose. The next one is clear expectations to graduate. That should happen early in the phase, right? That should be really clear up front. And then you want to know, how am I doing? So expectations are an easy way to then now have some evaluation, or at least be able to get some formative evaluation, some continuous progress reports that allows you to keep building. Am I doing a good job? Exposure and visibility with scholars and leaders in the field. Your mentor is the person who has a network already established. How can that network become part of your network? And believe it or not, when you go to these conferences, if you probably have experienced this already, you think about your advisor or your coach and you say, how do they know all these people? And some of these people I cite, and I could never talk to them. And your advisor hopefully is playing the role, or your coach is introducing you to these people, saying they're doing really good work, this is what their focus is on, or this is how they're building on what we already have done. And pretty soon you can start communicating this naturally with that person. The last one there is insight into organizational culture. ABE obviously has a unique culture, which is different than YDAE, which is different than forestry and natural resources. So sometimes you just need to know, what is that unspoken language that people live, but no one talks about, because you don't talk about things you can't really see, but everybody's experiencing them, and so there's important things that you have to know how to navigate culture, norms, and so your mentor hopefully allows you as a protege to get a clue into what some of those might be. In some departments, there's potentially landmines. You don't want to step on those landmines; they'll go off. So you have to know how to get around them. And that's not just academia, that's in industry, that's in any organization. There's just some things you have to know how to get around or how to work through without upsetting other people. So that's a little introduction as to why we should have mentoring, why we should be working on it. Today I would like to really facilitate a discussion. I tried to highlight a few examples in my opening comments, and I'm going to try to get you to discuss with among each other using that yellow worksheet. What can we do about getting started, building a foundation of success, and providing social support and guidance? So what I'm going to suggest as you work through this worksheet, if you're being mentored right now, if you're a protege, you can turn over to one side that says this is for the protege. If you're saying someday I want to be a mentor, I want to help others, I want to try to provide the guidance necessary, then turn it over to the side that talks about these are strategies for the mentor. And if you look, what I did here is I tried to pull from a book called Elements of Mentoring. And it's a very practical book, and it works through a lot of different examples. And I really drew heavily on some of what I thought were important strategies in this. The book has more than what's on your sheet. But I thought if I kept it simple, or at least short to one page, then you probably would actually read it and take it home or back to your office and use it. So I just kind of selected those I thought would be a good representation of things to talk about with your advisor or for you to think about as you need to be mentored. And I put them in a way that they should mirror each other. So if you look at the first page on one, there's a grouping about getting started. And if you flip back and forth, they're not perfect, but they kind of line up with each other as what the mentor should do versus what the protege should do. So hopefully that little handout is a useful tool for you to at least start to formalize. You understand my perspective on that. Try to provide some structure to the mentoring process. This is what it looks like. It looks like a table that has these different strategies to think about, or at least different principles to think about, and then we'll work through the strategies. But together, what we hope happens here is two people sit down and they start working through a plan. And they build trust. That's part of that important relationship. But trust is built through an interchange of ideas. And so the interchange of ideas should be around, okay, what are your goals? But these are the expectations. And so you start navigating this process, this communication. You're asking questions. No doubt your mentor probably asked some questions. What are your career goals? What do you think about being a researcher or being more field-based or et cetera? And of course, there's this mutual respect. We call that positive regard for one another. And the mentor then provides the support and feedback. So the protege is really trying to push this front of asking questions and showing respect to the mentor. And the mentor, of course, is providing the support as well as the feedback so that you know how you're doing. As we work through this worksheet, you can see that I tried to show this mirror of the two. So you come prepared, and it just walks you through, okay, a mentor should do this, and of course the protege should do the same in that case. Sometimes talk about the big picture, recount your mentoring experience with your protege, explain what worked and what didn't. The protege is listening, trying to pick up on cues, okay? So that's what the strategy here that we're trying to build as we think through this work. Now, your worksheet looks a little different than this, but this is how it should work as they feed each other. This PowerPoint is available on the MAP website, so you're welcome to be able to use this and get this and use it as an example as you work through this. So the first thing here on your worksheet is building a foundation for success. What this is really your career development. As a protege, what are you doing to prepare yourself specifically to make sure you're reaching the milestones or doing the right things to be competitive in the job market? So one of those examples that I thought I would share with you to think about is, have you outlined your map for success? Do you know the pathway or pathways that you can get to your career, and what are those important milestones? And it may be the milestones are the same no matter if you decide to go industry or if you decide to go to academia. But those are some things to be thinking about as you look at that. The other thing is start working on your bio and CV. How many of you have a bio and CV? I'm sure the hands will go up on this, right? But believe it or not, when some grad students start their program, they're like, what are you talking about? What is this? And so if you start to know what that is and what that looks like early, you then can say, oh, I should do something to help fill out my service area. That's why we might do Bug Fest or Spring Fest. Okay, the last one there is basically getting into the idea that you want to teach people how to think, teach them how to fish rather than just giving them answers or giving them the fish. And you've heard that concept before. And that's why asking questions from both sides is really important. Of course, you can think about your ladder of, okay, you do a poster which leads you to maybe an article that gets submitted into a journal. Of course, you understand that process quite well if you're a postdoc, I'm sure. But another one is the psychosocial strategies. That's kind of a word we use in the human sciences. What that really means is how a person feels. Do they feel supported? Are their needs being met? Do their personal attributes, their personality, is it playing into this process? And so one of the things you have to do is think about building trust. And how do you build trust? And there's just a list of ideas there, making sure that there's open communication, there's common ground, people have positive regard one for another, and those are things that just need to be worked on in a relationship. Of course, focus on balance and being reasonable. There's more to life than work. I've already spoken to that. And it's okay. Some people have different levels of comfort, but I think in order for a healthy relationship to exist, you have to have both personal as well as professional. If it's 100% professional, at some point you say, does that person really care about me? Or is it just about me and this job or this role? And so that's why there's good to have some balance there. You'll have to navigate to what extent do you and that person feel comfortable with that. One of the things I do is, and if you don't do this, you might plant the idea or start doing it naturally with your advisor, is I have my students send me weekly updates, progress reports. What did you do? What are you working on? What questions do you have? And I meet with them weekly. And so I just pull this email up and we go through that as our agenda for our weekly meeting. It keeps us on task to know what's important. What is the focus to this? That has been extremely useful. And so if you feel like I go to my meeting with my advisor and my coach and we just kind of talk, but I sometimes I have a hard time getting my questions answered because sometimes they talk about things that they're working on, but I need to talk about what I'm working on. This could be a very useful tool. I look forward to meeting with you on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. I just wanted to give you a heads up as to what I've been working on and some questions that I'd like to talk about. You see how that's not threatening? It's a very useful way to get the focus around it's your meeting if you're the protege. And so, I mean, it's together, it's both of you, but really that person's meeting because of you, right? And so that's where you can help direct that in a way that will be useful and beneficial. So hopefully this has been good for you to kind of get a feel for what do we mean by mentoring, what are some of the parameters or types of things that we're looking for, and then to let you discuss what are some strategies that you look at on this sheet that you say, oh, this is a good idea. I want to explore how could I work on this as a protege? Or if you want to be a mentor, how would you do, what are some important things that you think you'd really like to emphasize as a mentor that you could use? And so that you can see the three areas: getting started, focus around the career goals of the person, building the right things because they need a job someday, but also don't forget they are still a person and they need some support and they need some feedback regarding that development. So that's kind of how we framed it. It is how we framed it. And so now I'd like to open it up for you guys to have a discussion with each other. If you want to do it in pairs, or if you just want to you're a small enough group, you can gather and you can just start asking each other questions. A lot of times people say, look, I wish I would have gotten this. And that's okay too. So how can we maybe get ideas from each other to help maybe address a need you might have or some needs you might have? And a lot of time these discussions we spend on things that we're not getting rather than, oh, this works really well. But either way, we can talk about the positives or we can talk about your needs, and hopefully before you leave today you got one or two things that you can go home or go back to your office and try. Or at least maybe someday you're saying, I definitely want to use this. Trying to make this very practical. Open discussion? How you guys want to do this? You guys know each other really well, so why don't you just...
I'd like to start with a question. It just occurred to me. When I came in, I was thinking very selfishly about my mentor. I'm getting mentored and then eventually hope to mentor graduate students if I get a faculty job. But I'm going to be working with a surf student this summer. And so some of you are doing mentoring right now. And so what really helps you balance mentoring with postdoc work or graduate work, that sort of thing? Have we found ways to incorporate that in or balance it? Or is that just something we don't do as postdocs, balance?
You mean how to balance the postdoc work?
Yeah, do all your work and how to incorporate, I guess, mentoring into what you do regularly as a postdoc anyway.
So if I understand your question, it almost feels like you're taking on a new task. So do you have time to do this? Or is there a way that we can figure out how to build it into your existing schedule or your existing tasks so that it's more integrated rather than an add-on? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the student I'm mentoring, he's doing the quite different job from what I'm doing. So yeah, it is not that integrating, but it's helpful to me as well because I can understand how the model he's working is working. So, but sometimes, especially recently, he's writing the paper. I'm not paper. He's a thesis and manuscript, and I'm supposed to revise and review his manuscript, and he's not good at English like me, and I'm not good at English, so I'm providing some feedback. But I'm not sure that this way is really helpful to him, or how can I say? So for example, I'm revising his sentence for my understanding. Because sometimes I cannot understand what he's want to express. Sure. So for my, but he may think he may not like my style of writing, but he may not. Sometimes he don't understand why I want to revise this sentence to this something like this. So we got some miscommunication on the style and how to revise or review, and so that is the one of the difficulties I have. So it is kind of a trivial, not about the overall objectives and big methodology, but it's kind of a very trivial. But it actually annoying most of us. So.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it really answered or addressed the question, but it brought up a situation where there are multiple layers as we work through things. And so some of them may have been content or, okay, the research design needs to be changed. Or the method you use, the procedures you use, they need to be changed. You need to do this differently. Well, that's substantive technical change that needs to happen in the manuscript. And so trying to say, okay, I want to address the technical knowledge of this paper. Now I'm going to navigate the style that the paper's written in. This is too passive, or this needs to be written in a style that fits the professional expectation of who's going to be reading this. So you almost have to just like say, okay, let's talk about the knowledge and technical first. Now let's navigate and let's talk about the style and the way English should be written. Now you have to understand English is my second language, but at least this is how I'm picking up on this. And let's find somebody else. So your mentor, or you may not be the only mentor for this student. And that's another important thing to think about. As you try to navigate, can I do it all? Perhaps there are some resources out there or some other resource people out there that could help navigate the things that you may not have time for or that you may not be as good at. So I think that's one strategy is knowing your limitations and then seeing can we have a team of mentors here. Dr. Esters, go see him about this. Go see Kristen about how you write this up in a way that a graduate student's experiencing. Now we got 3 people involved, and they come back to you after a week or 2, and pretty soon it's no longer they think it's your problem or his problem. it's diffused that now we're talking about it in a I guess a less controversial or personal way. So I think it's a great question, though. Other thoughts about?
Well, can you guys please, if you have, share your experiences of mentoring as a faculty member, or as a postdoc, or as a
What is
graduate
the difference? Like, what should be the difference when a postdoc mentoring or when a grad student mentoring and a faculty mentoring?
And always there is a kind of, a traditional. I mean, if you are a faculty member, the understanding of the PG or whatever, the students when approach the faculty a little bit in a different way to the probably postdoc, and even if approach differently to the graduate student, because even if a graduate student
It's a great
is 1
question.
year or 2 years, she is.
You're asking a really good question. It's one of those questions I say, now that's a preliminary exam question. It's complex. It's got lots to it, but I love it. That's the right type of question we should be answering. You want to take a stab, or should I?
No, I'll start.
Go for it.
Well, I think the way I look at it, the difference between mentoring at those three levels, and the grad student level, the postdoc level, and the faculty member, is that you're moving. Each of those stages has different developmental needs, and so I'll use the example of Kristen. So Kristen's my advisee. Actually, I'm not co-advisor, but I work with her primarily. But the way I look at my role with Kristen is that, first of all, we meet weekly. Sometimes we meet more than once a week, but it's very much hands-on, trying to guide her and help her navigate not only the culture of the department, but the university, the college as well. So we do a lot of sharing, a lot of sitting around having conversations. And so that's the grad student level. Then I think at the postdoc level, now I haven't personally had a postdoc before, perhaps Dr. Knobloch has, but I think at the postdoc level, you're transitioning to that of a professional. You're more independent. And so, although I still think there needs to be some level of hands-on and a hands-on approach, I think you need to allow that student or that individual to be able to make decisions independent of yourself. Let them really learn from their experiences on their own and how to navigate the process of making decisions. And then when they see or feel comfortable, it should be an understanding that he or she is comfortable enough that they can come back to you and say, okay, this is what I did, what do you think? And then as you move to the faculty level, I think at that point you have an individual that is clearly autonomous. They were hired because they were good at what they do, and there should be some greater degree of, okay, Kristen, you need to go out as a faculty member. Here are the resources you have access to, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. I'm here if you need that advice, and I will lend you my advice, but at the end of the day, that decision rests solely with you. And so I think there's a developmental process or approach that you need to take at each of those levels. That's my initial opening comments. I don't know what you have to add to that.
Well,
or if you had a postdoc for that matter.
I have not done a postdoc. I didn't mentor a postdoc.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to talk about two things. And one is this level of formality that is attached to your role. So who has a higher stake at making sure their job gets done for mentoring faculty or postdoc? Or a grad student mentoring a grad student. So who has the higher stakes as a mentor? The faculty. It is my responsibility to make sure that Kristen is successful as a graduate student. Now, we have people who have different philosophies about what that means, but ultimately, the advisor or co-advisor, we are responsible. And if we give her bad advice, or if we maybe don't give her the right advice, she may not be successful in a way that she could have been. And so when that takes place, I think it elevates and changes the discussion and the nature of the discussion a little bit. When you're mentoring and you're giving advice to a grad student as a fellow grad student, or a grad student to an undergrad, I mean, maybe the only thing you really have that you have to be concerned about is what? Maybe a grade? if there's independent study credit or you're the TA for a course, is so it's not very high stakes. There's some at stake. So you kind of have to think about, what is the level of risk that's involved with you doing that job as a mentor? Does that help to think about your role?
So, to come to your point, that because of that and the response of the faculty to the, grad students or faculty or postdoc is also different. You know what I'm saying? Because the way he responds or he treats or he takes the serious advice of the mentors. It also depends upon how he get the support. For example, they get all the entire support from the faculty. Actually, faculty is his life. If he does some mistakes, if he doesn't treat him well, his whole career might be, in a wrong direction.
So as a postdoc, you're a middle ground person,
yes,
right? You're getting caught in between.
Right, everything like that. The way he treats is also different. And also it depends upon the kind of research. Like if you are, sometimes as a grad student also, you might be directly helping him in a research very concretely rather than faculty. At that times, things work out pretty well also.
Right.
If you have given a very good support in his research, automatically he or she develops a very good relationship. That might happen. So there are so many factors, but it is always a difference level of depending upon in which level you are working, in which level you are mentoring.
As a postdoc, my advice is you have to be doing well at two things: mentoring, as well as being mentored. Because I saw you kind of do I hope I become a faculty member someday. So the best way to become a faculty member, if you have not had a position like that, is you have to establish this trajectory that you can do it. Doing well and managing a lab that may have had some people reporting to you is where mentoring matters, as you being a mentor. And who's going to speak for you? It's going to be the person that you provide a reference. So that's your supervisor or your advisor. So now you have to essentially make sure that they're supporting you and are willing to back you up as you're mentoring those who you're mentoring. But then you also have to make sure that your needs are being met as protege. So you're getting caught in between, if you will. But it's really, my experience has been, more transparent you can be in helping to communicate how you're navigating both levels, I think is absolutely critical. And I know there's a lot of personalities involved, and so there's all these context differences. But that's what you should be aiming for as the postdoc, is I see myself as a team, and I'm kind of the middle-level manager, if you will. And it's not easy, and every day is different. Depending on how the moods of people are and how things go in the lab. It's a great question. The other thing I want to mention is recently a graduate student shared with me from another workshop that there are 4 stages of mentoring. This builds on Dr. Esther's comment. There's 4 stages of mentoring, and you have a role and your protege has a role. The first stage, early in the process, is the mentor is a director, and the protege is a novice. The student. So I'll just say that the mentor is the director, and then the student is the novice. So what that means is you're probably giving lots of answers. You need to know. The percent of talking is going to be that the mentor is doing the talking as the novice is doing the listening. Stage 2, after you get past that early expectation phase or the getting acclimated, stage 2, the mentor becomes a master and the student becomes an apprentice. So you're lessening, I'm going to tell you, but now I'm going to guide you, if you will. I'm going to structure their guidance, because the third level is the guide and then the collaborator. So you're lessening the structure from master to guide. You're now becoming a guide, and you're now collaborating. It ends with the fourth level when that person probably is ready to graduate as a student, or you're ready to leave because you have the faculty position. It should be the mentor is a consultant and the student is a colleague. And when the student shared this with me, I thought, how beautiful. Because as a mentor, I do wear these hats. And as you guide students through their developmental process, I may be really structured up front, and this is what you need to do. And as they come to me with questions, if they're in their third year or fourth year, I usually answer their question by saying, well, let's think about it. And I start asking them the questions that I need to answer if I would be answering the question. Because I need to launch them to be successful without me. And I think that also kind of plays these stages, if you will. You have to wear these hats. I call it a four-billed hat. Depending which way it faces out, that's your role. And you're rotating this thing depending on, it's an undergrad student. You're probably going to be a director. This is a second-year master's student. They've been in the lab for 2 years now. Well, you're probably going to be somewhere between a master or a guide. I hope that helps give you something tangible to think about.
As far as your question earlier about the CERF student, so one thing, most of my mentoring is provide guidance and support, not the building a foundation for success part. But I spend a lot of my lunches intentionally meeting with people. Sort of every other week, I have different lunches scheduled with different people in my department or my field. And usually we just talk about our lives, but like getting that personal support that they may or may not get at all from their advisor just based on how professional a relationship is without the personal side. But I think that like a time like lunch or dinner or some time that you already have something you're going to be doing besides work to like try and channel some time towards investing in a relationship. You might not end up losing as much time in doing that, and then it can be encouraging and get, make you excited about the rest of your work that day or something. But that's not as much the actual hands-on that you're going to be needing to do though as well.
It's interesting. That ties into sort of your alluding to something that I try to do with the grad students in my lab, and that is the person I work with, the faculty member. She's a pretty intimidating person because she's very type A and very good at what she does and all of this, and that's great. But so I wonder sometimes and that's fine for me because I have a rapidly burgeoning ego and I'm happy to work with that. But I wonder if some of the students are sort of intimidated by that sometimes, and so maybe thinking about these different levels like we're talking about, I thought maybe I can take advantage of the fact that I'm lower. I'm not this huge, intimidating person. I'm not very successful yet, and I'm not high up the ladder. And so maybe you can sort of use that, kind of like you're talking about, you're not going to be. You can meet with me more informally and be less concerned about what you say to me than you might be with someone who is.
Use it to your advantage. Yeah. Absolutely, and it's a great idea. How can we integrate? Both people need to eat, so let's just talk. Now we're eating and talking, and we're accomplishing 2 tasks, 3, 4. That's awesome. Great ideas.
The other thing that we have some CERF students in our lab, and I don't think I was ever the sole mentor of a CERF student, but I sort of co-mentored a couple of them.
Right.
And my work is all computer modeling, but in our group we all do some of everything. So there's some lab work my group does, and that a couple summers CERF students were helping in the lab, and so something that I realized wasn't. So you start working in a lab, there's someone washing dishes and someone doing some experiment or whatever, and then there's sort of this quick assembly line. And anyway, it was really easy for the undergrads to just wash dishes and not say, I want to do that other thing. And then the grad students were, we're busy, we're just faster at this, we're just going to do this. And realizing, even if it takes time and even if it's not done quite as well the first few times, we really need to be training them and I'll go wash the dishes. It's not about my time and how I'm spending my time. So I think realizing little things that could be teaching and helping, because undergrads won't necessarily take that initiative to say they want to do something, especially if they're intimidated by us, which I think even as a postdoc, people could be intimidated as we so it's good to be approachable.
Excellent.
And another difficulty I have in mentoring is I think that we have been working through the stage 1, 2, 3, something like that. But sometimes when the student is under high pressures or is pushed by the due date or something like that, and then he want to go back to the stage 1, and then he sometimes he want to direct the answer for me for his problem he have, right? So in this case, I do not want to cross the line, but I'm not sure how to deal with this situation gently and kindly. So
yeah, and time, the deadline, and the time is of essence.
Yes.
And so you try to avoid those, but obviously stress makes it complicated. All at once, you're trying to navigate to being more of a collaborator, and all at once you're now being directed like you're a novice.
Right.
What would you do, Dr. Esters?
Well, to be honest, I think the approach that I would take, and I think that what you're just explaining is fitting for someone like Kristen, because there were times, I think, a couple times, Kristen, I find myself trying to be more directive with her. And then I think one day we had a conversation, she was like, well, I can do this, so, so we had a discussion, a conversation, and I kind of sat back and I said, I was fearful that if I didn't take that hands-on approach, it wouldn't get done. But then I said to myself, well, I'm just going to let her do it, have confidence in her, have faith in her, and I've kind of pulled back. So, and it's worked out. I mean, she does things, and I do remind her sometimes just because I want to make sure that, I don't want her to miss something and then she looks bad. So I do I'm always thinking about that with Kristen, did you do it? Not because I'm trying to tell her what to do, but I don't want her to look bad and people say, well, a grad student, Dr. Esther, isn't following through. So I'm just mindful of certain things. But I guess back to your point, I guess if I was that professor, I would hope that, or if it was one of our grad students who, one of our postdocs or a PhD student, we could have a conversation where that student could say, I recognize there's a deadline, we need to meet, but I can get this done. I can step my game up, if you will, and get it done. So I think it needs to be, again, a conversation or a dialogue. And, I try to tell my grad students, if you have a problem, sit down and tell me. Just be honest and be frank. I won't take offense to it. Because I have one in particular that, I think I asked Kristen, it was one of my graduates who made a comment, and I was mindful of it. So I think sometimes we need to be reminded that sometimes we need to change our behaviors as well. So that's how I would handle it. I would just, get to the point where, again, as the faculty member, I would entrust in you to get it done, but make it clear that we have a deadline that's right in our face, and we need to do what we can. So I guess that's how I would answer.
Yeah, and what you're seeing here is that mentoring, it varies by personality, style.
Yeah.
And so your particular case is a little different than what you're going to hear Dr. Esters and I. My approach as a faculty member would be, okay, if you want to be a collaborator and you want to try to see if you can handle a majority of the work of being first author, that's great. I want to see it at least twice before it gets submitted. So I'll try to be clear, but I'll try to put it in your court. Now, if it gets accepted, wonderful. That's awesome. If it doesn't, I may ask the question, what do you think you could have done differently? So I'll use that as a coachable moment, a teachable moment, to try to see if maybe they needed a little bit more. They were running too far ahead and they didn't maybe have the skill set to pull it off. But in your case, I think what I would do is just ask the advisor in a very kind way, we do have this deadline. What's your schedule look like? How many times would you like to see? What are you expecting to be your role? Do you want to write some sections? Do you want to see it 2 times or 3 times before it goes in? If so, I'll try to get it to you Tuesday night, and Thursday night before it gets submitted on Saturday. Is that okay with you? So just shifting the conversation to being clear about what does that person expect of you. It kind of goes back to the getting started phase and getting that clear so that you're not guessing, is he playing a game with me? I don't think a lot of times that a game is being played. I think it's just we're not being clear enough about what each two parties are trying to accomplish. Both of you want to get it submitted. The advisor wants you to be successful. And of course you do too. So therefore they may take on the role of, okay, I better get more involved. Well, what would you like to see? Could I give this to you now? Give me feedback on that while I'm working on the next phase. And I think that's how I would direct it. Is how do you want it to play out? And ask them if that's okay if we could just meet mini deadlines or smaller deadlines prior to the big one. Is that practical enough?
Yeah. Right. But I thought, for example, the student doesn't like I'm saying like it depends on me. I can show you other options, and I can give you some guide, but you should decide. You should choose one of these, and it depends on you. So, but that is my, how can I say, my way to do mentoring. But especially when he under high stress for the push, and he just said to me, "Don't say like this, don't say like this." But I cannot give you the direct answer. But and I don't have any answer. I don't have the clear right answer for this. You should find it. You should figure out by yourself. But I can help you. I can provide other possible feasible options for this, how to solve this problem. But the issue is the deadline, or it's his thesis. So he should take care of everything. Actually, he should decide everything. But I can give him some guidance and options. But and so getting complicated as time goes. So
I think asking questions. Your role now should be asking questions, and the level of being a director versus a colleague. A colleague is, they probably will ask more open questions, but a director will say really specific questions. So do you think you should use A or B, and why? Versus what method should you use? Leaving it open-ended. So I think your role could be facilitated by just asking questions. You just may have to be more. You may have to prioritize, okay, what 3 questions can I ask today that I want answered in a couple days? What are the greatest priorities here that he needs to work through or she needs to work through? So asking questions is probably going to be better than just telling, you need to do X or Y. Think about, would you use X or Y and why? And let me know what you think in a couple days or tomorrow.
Also meeting with at that time of stressful or deadlining approaching or something like that, meeting in a bigger group, like inviting professors or something like that might be helpful. Like sometimes discussing with if you have a professor also, just invite him also.
Excellent. Discussions. Very good advice.
It's a very serious issue also. So little bit discussing in 2-3 people's more.
Yep.
Again,
with experience, what we tend to do is we try to help students nail down their deadline early, the timeline to meet that deadline early. So, okay, you want to submit to this conference? It's due June 1st. Well, today is April 15th. I want to see a weekly timeline of all the little steps that need to be done before June 1st. Rather than waiting, and it's May 25th, and you're now stressed. So through experiences, we've learned helping students map out a deadline is useful. And then you can ask them, how are you doing? It goes back to establishing clear expectations early.
That specific thing is something that's been helpful with me because I tend to be a little differently organized than other people, which is a fancy way of saying terribly disorganized. And so working backwards like that has really helped me get on task and make sure that I'm hitting my deadline. Saying this is due June 1st, well, that means I need it to my committee or to my advisor 10 days before that, which means I need it done 2 days before that so I can revise it. And if I need it done 2 days for that, that means I need this section done. And so working backwards like that is what has helped me and my terribly disorganized procrastinating self become less disorganized and only slightly procrastinating, hopefully.
Yeah, because what happens is it shifts the conversation to you have to now fight the calendar rather than fighting me as a person. Right? It takes the conflict, a little bit of the conflict away.
So if you are thinking like as a faculty you are advising a student, if you are thinking the student is progressing in a good way, and maybe you will be having once in a week or meeting, right? So you may not be getting the full picture of how the things are going, and on a sudden day if you are coming across that that student is almost in a collapsing stage, like he is in full stress, he is like sudden you are getting to know that on that day like that student is in a very difficult stage. So how will you react to that?
Well, you go to category 3, the grouping number 3. It's psychosocial support. Look, something is out of balance here. So let's prioritize. I need to understand what's stressing you out. And the student may say, look, next week I have a stats exam and I have these other 2 big assignments due. All right. It's no big deal. As an advisor then, you have to decide, okay, what matters? Right now, what matters is they got to get the grade. And if we miss the deadline for this conference, it's no big deal because I had another one in mind for you that's 3 months later. Oh, okay. So you go right into that psychosocial support. So it's this game of trade-offs. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not always clear-cut, but you're like, okay, psychosocial support needs to happen today.
Yeah.
And so you basically set category 2 aside, that whole notion of are we making progress towards your career goals and objectives, kind of set that aside to say, okay, how can we get through this? You're stressed. You're depressed. Let's put life in balance so that we can then get back to... Any comments to that?
No,
you're seeing the clock is about
making me mindful of the time. I guess we have a couple of minutes. A couple of things I want to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong. You have those evaluations, and hopefully you can complete those. And then another thing is that in the sign-in sheet, Kristen will be emailing you, and the purpose of the email primarily is just to keep them up to speed on what's next. Is that right, Kristen?
Correct.
And I guess I didn't mention, I don't know if you hand out, you won't have the flyer, yeah, so that flyer. So, what I'm, well, yeah, I know, but this